It started with a sound I'll never forget, a knock that didn't belong in a neighborhood like ours. Not the friendly kind that comes with a borrowed cup of sugar or a welcome pie. This one was sharp, deliberate, and full of intent. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. By the time I opened the door, the world I thought I knew, the quiet cul-de-sac, the smiling neighbors, the promise of peace, had already started to crack. The man on my porch wasn't a cop, but he carried himself like one. Polo shirt tucked too neatly, badge stitched where authority should have been earned, not printed. Behind him, a golf cart idled at the curb, its hazard lights flickering in the morning fog. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that tiny flicker of amber light, was the first spark of a war that would burn through everything I cared about. They said it was about violations, about a trash can left too long by the curb or the wrong shade of paint on the shutters. But it was never really about rules. It was about power, about control disguised as order. And once you challenge people who've built their entire identity on control, you don't just make enemies, you make believers, true believers. Over the next few weeks, the letters started coming. The fines, the warnings, the threats written in polite corporate language, words that cut deeper than they should have. I thought I could ignore them. I thought being right was enough. But I was wrong. Because when people with clipboards start thinking they're above the law, and when the neighborhood you bought into starts turning into something that feels more like a surveillance state than a community, you realize too late that the fight isn't about property anymore. It's about survival. I learned that the hard way. The morning they came for my daughter, and before you say that sounds impossible, before you roll your eyes and think, that would never happen where I live, you should know, neither did I. So tell me, what would you do if the people meant to protect your neighborhood turned on your family instead? Brook Haven Estates wasn't the kind of place you expected trouble to start. On paper, it was everything the brochures promised: manicured lawns, picket fences, street names that sounded like lullabies. Oakview, Whispering Pines, Serenity Lane, the kind of neighborhood that seemed frozen in a permanent golden hour. You could smell freshly cut grass every Saturday morning, hear sprinklers hiss like clockwork, and catch the glint of morning light off chrome mailboxes lined up in perfect symmetry. That's why we moved there. After 2 decades in the Marines, I was done with chaos. I wanted peace, the kind that felt earned. My wife, Erin, wanted stability. Our daughter, Lily, wanted safety. And for a while it seemed like we'd found it. The house wasn't big, but it had a wide porch that caught the sunset and a backyard big enough for Lily's swing set and my rusting grill. Every morning she'd ride her bike down the curved street to the gate, ponytail swinging, the whole world still simple in her eyes. Neighbors waved. The Johnsons across the street hosted barbecues every other weekend. Mrs. Turner, a retired teacher, kept bird feeders on every branch of her oak tree. Even the HOA board members, the self-appointed guardians of order, played their roles with practiced smiles. Howard Vance, the president, was the kind of man who spoke like every word was part of a campaign speech. Silver hair, pressed shirts, and a handshake that felt like a contract you didn't remember signing. His vice president, Diane Brooks, was quieter, polite in public, vicious in private. She was the one who reminded people about lawn lengths and mailbox paint colors through clipped notes tucked under doormats. The third, Carl Weaver, was the enforcer type, always seen in his golf cart, clipboard on his lap, radio clipped to his belt, like a mall cop waiting for his big moment. They ran Brook Haven like a private fiefdom. Rules weren't just rules, they were moral codes. Grass over 3 inches? Violation. Garage door left open too long? Violation. Trash bin visible from the curb? Violation. It was all written in the bylaws, black and white, tucked inside a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. At first, I thought it was harmless. A little overbearing maybe, but harmless. Until the first notice showed up in my mailbox. It was for Lily's chalk art. She'd drawn a mural on the driveway, bright suns, stick figures, our dog, a big blue house with hearts for windows. The letter called it graffiti, said it violated the community's aesthetic standards. Erin laughed it off, but I saw the way the paper was worded, formal, cold, and threatening. It didn't ask for cooperation. It demanded obedience. That was the first red flag. The second came a week later when Carl stopped me during my morning jog. He had that same fake badge stitched onto his polo and the tone of someone who liked using it. "Morning, Jack," he said. "We've noticed your fence hasn't been restained in over a year. The board prefers uniform color standards." I stared at him for a long second, sweat dripping down my temple. "The fence is fine," I said. Carl smiled like a man testing boundaries. "For now," he said. That night, I checked the bylaws again. Fence maintenance, subsection 4, paragraph C. Staining recommended annually. Recommended, not required. But in Brook Haven, recommendations were just orders that hadn't been tested yet. Still, I didn't want to make enemies. I'd had enough of that overseas. So I restained the fence, paid the fine, and told myself it was easier to keep the peace. Then came the whispers. It started small. A comment at the mailbox. "You should really attend the HOA meetings. They like to know who's keeping up." Howard doesn't take kindly to non-compliance. Always polite, always coated in honey. But underneath, you could hear it, the warning. The next HOA meeting I attended was in the clubhouse. Bright fluorescent lights, folding chairs, and a podium set up like a miniature courtroom. Howard stood at the front, Diane at his side, Carl pacing near the door. The board members sat behind a long table covered in stacks of paper and plastic nameplates. Howard opened with a smile. "Welcome, neighbors," he said, voice smooth as oil. "Just a few small issues to discuss tonight. Small issues." That's what he called them. The fines, the warnings, the penalties that piled up like sandbags around people's patience. A man named Blake tried to complain about a recent citation, a cracked driveway that apparently detracted from community uniformity. Diane cut him off mid-sentence. "Rules apply to everyone, Mr. Blake. We all signed the agreement." Howard nodded, hands folded. "Order keeps Brook Haven beautiful." The room was silent. Nobody wanted to challenge them. I could feel the fear the same way you feel tension before a storm, heavy and humming, when I spoke up gently, respectfully, and asked if maybe they were enforcing the rules too strictly. Howard smiled again, but his eyes didn't. "Mr. Mercer," he said, drawing out the syllables like a reprimand, "you of all people should understand the importance of order and discipline." Laughter rippled from the front row, the kind that wasn't meant to be kind. I didn't argue. I just nodded and sat down. But as I looked around that room, I noticed something I hadn't before. People weren't there to participate. They were there to comply. Over the next month, the pressure increased. Another notice arrived, this time about Lily's bike being left by the porch. Then one about Aaron's flower beds, apparently unauthorized landscaping. Each one phrased like a court summons, citing rules and sub-rules from pages buried deep in that massive HOA binder. The kicker came when Aaron accidentally missed a payment deadline for a $50 fine. Within a week, they'd added late fees, then administrative charges, turning it into $250. By the time she tried to contest it, Howard sent an email. Disputes can only be raised in person during board sessions. The next meeting was postponed indefinitely. That was when I realized it wasn't incompetence. It was design. They wanted people too exhausted to fight back, people who'd rather pay than push. And for most, it worked. But not for me, because one afternoon, Lily came home from school, pale and quiet. She said the community officers had spoken to her, asked her name, told her she needed to follow neighborhood rules like her parents didn't. She was 13. I called Howard that evening. He didn't pick up. The next morning, Carl drove by twice, then 3 times. I watched from the window as he slowed, took notes, and spoke into his radio. The friendly waves were gone now. Neighbors looked away. The Johnsons stopped inviting us over. Mrs. Turner crossed the street when she saw me. The whole neighborhood felt staged. Smiles when you were near, whispers when you weren't. The illusion of paradise was cracking, and underneath was something rotten. Then one night, while taking out the trash, I saw a man I didn't recognize, standing under a street lamp, phone in hand, snapping pictures of my yard. When I called out, he turned and walked quickly toward the clubhouse. His polo had the same stitched badge, Enforcement Division. That was the third red flag, the one I couldn't ignore. I started keeping notes. Dates, times, details, every letter, every warning, every encounter. I mounted a small camera above the garage and another facing the gate. Erin said I was being paranoid, but when I showed her the footage, Carl stopping by at midnight, headlights off, radio buzzing, she went silent. By the time the next HOA newsletter came out, our names were printed in it. Residents under review for multiple violations. No details. Just a quiet stain meant to turn neighbors against us, Lily cried that night. Said her friends' parents told them not to come over anymore. Erin tried to hold it together, but I saw the cracks forming in her composure. This wasn't just bureaucracy. It was targeted humiliation, and still, I tried to reason with them. I emailed Howard, offered to meet privately. He replied 2 days later with one line. The board prefers formal communication channels. Translation, we make the rules. You play along, but I'd spent too many years following real authority to mistake arrogance for law. Something was off, too organized, too aggressive. And then, the final straw, the safety patrol. It started as a new initiative, according to their flyer. Neighborhood Watch, authorized by the HOA board. But these weren't watchful neighbors. These were men with radios, driving carts with flashing lights, stopping residents at the gate like traffic police. The first time they stopped me, they claimed they were verifying residency. The second time, they asked to see my compliance status. By the third, I stopped being polite. I remember Lily standing beside me, holding her backpack, her eyes wide as one of them blocked our way with the cart. Sir, we have reason to believe there's an ongoing violation under your household. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. A violation? My kid's trying to get to school. The man didn't blink. Then she should come with us to resolve it. That was the moment I knew peace was gone. From that point on, Brook Haven didn't feel like a neighborhood anymore. It felt like occupied territory, and I'd spent enough of my life in those to recognize one when I saw it. And as I stood there, watching the so-called officers drive away, their radios crackling, I realized something bigger was coming, something none of us were prepared for, because in Brook Haven, power didn't protect people. It watched them, and once power decides you're the problem, it doesn't stop knocking. By the time summer came around, Brook Haven no longer felt like home. It felt like a test, one I hadn't agreed to take. The streets that used to hum with lawnmowers and laughter now buzzed with quiet tension, radios, and rumor. Every morning, there was something new waiting in my mailbox, a fine, a warning, a community update written like a threat dressed in politeness. The first one that really got under my skin came after the fence incident. Failure to maintain uniform property standards, that was the phrase. They'd decided my porch light was the wrong color temperature. Too yellow, apparently. The notice even included a photo, taken at night, zoomed in from across the street. Someone was watching my house after dark. Erin tried to laugh it off, said it was absurd, but I could see the worry settling into the corners of her eyes. Then came the fines. Small at first, $20 here, $50 there. Then they escalated, layered with administrative fees and processing surcharges. Every envelope was thicker than the last. I called the HOA office to ask for clarification, and Diane answered. Her voice had that brittle cheerfulness that people use when they know they've got power. "Oh, Mr. Mercer," she said, "everything's explained in the bylaws. I'm sure you understand how important consistency is." Consistency. That was their favorite word. It meant control. I started to notice how quiet the neighbors had become. The Johnsons, who used to wave from their porch, now avoided eye contact. I'd catch them closing their curtains when I stepped outside. Word spreads fast in a place like Brook Haven, and the board knew how to use it. A week later, a community poll appeared in everyone's mailbox. It asked whether residents believed certain households were creating disturbances or undermining neighborhood safety. No names, but everyone knew who it was about. The Mercers, the family with the Marine who wouldn't play by the rules. Lily came home from school that day with her head down. "Dad," she said, "some kids told me their parents said we're trouble." She tried to sound brave, but her voice cracked on the last word. That night, I sat on the porch long after the sun went down. The street lights hummed, moths fluttered, and somewhere down the road I saw a golf cart crawl past. Headlights dimmed, two silhouettes inside, watching, always watching. The next morning there was paint on our mailbox, just a smear of red but deliberate, a mark. I took pictures, filed a police report, and waited for a call back that never came. The sheriff's office said it was likely a neighborhood prank. That's how it always started. A prank, a misunderstanding, a clerical error. Each one small enough to brush off, but together they built something heavier. Something meant to break you by inches. Then came the landscaping dispute. It started when Erin planted roses near the walkway, her way of keeping a little beauty in the middle of the mess. A week later she got a letter. Unauthorized vegetation, it said. Removal required within 7 days to maintain community uniformity. She stood in the kitchen reading it aloud, disbelief in her voice. They're flowers, she said. Roses, I told her to leave them. 2 days later, we woke up to find them gone, uprooted. The soil still damp, petals scattered across the lawn like a warning. Erin didn't speak to anyone for days after that. She just sat by the window at night, staring out at the yard like she was waiting for something to move. I started documenting everything. Photos, recordings, timestamps. I printed every email, every notice, and kept them in a binder thicker than the one the HOA loved to wave around. That's when I noticed something strange. Every notice, every fine, every anonymous complaint, all of them were signed or authorized by the same 3 people, Vance, Brooks, and Weaver. The board wasn't enforcing rules. They were running a campaign, and we were the target. One evening, I decided to confront them. The HOA office was at the clubhouse, the same place where they held meetings, parties, and community events. It looked more like a courthouse than a social hall. Glass doors, tiled floors, and that faint smell of disinfectant that never quite went away. Diane was behind the desk when I walked in. Her smile froze the second she saw me. Mr. Mercer, she said, appointments are required for... I'm not here for an appointment, I said. I'm here for answers, she shifted, glancing toward the hallway where the board offices were. If this is about your fines, it's about my family, I said, and your harassment. Before she could respond, the door behind her opened, and Howard stepped out. Calm, polished, smug. Jack, he said, using that practiced politician's tone again. Always good to see a concerned resident. Cut the act, Howard, I said. You've crossed a line. You're targeting us, he smiled thinly. We're enforcing community standards. Nothing more. You uprooted my wife's garden, I said. Howard didn't even blink. If something was removed, I'm sure it was in accordance with the bylaws. The bylaws don't give you the right to vandalize private property. He leaned forward slightly, voice low. You'd be surprised what they allow. That was when I realized something else. Those bylaws weren't just rules. They were weapons, written vaguely enough to twist, sharp enough to cut. The next week, they turned them into blades. A letter arrived titled Emergency, Compliance Review. They were demanding a full inspection of my property, inside and out, to ensure alignment with community safety codes. When I refused citing privacy laws, they fined me for non-cooperation. It didn't stop there. They sent another letter claiming I'd violated nighttime noise restrictions. The supposed evidence. Reports from concerned residents. The noise they were referring to was Lily practicing her violin at 6 p.m. When I appealed, they rejected it within 24 hours. No hearing. No chance to present evidence. Just a stamped envelope that read, Final Decision. That night my truck was keyed. Deep, deliberate lines down both doors. No witnesses. No cameras, at least none that weren't conveniently under maintenance. The next morning, someone left a flyer under my windshield. Brook Haven deserves better. No names, no signatures. Just bold black letters. I started to see it in their faces. The neighbors who'd once been friendly now looked away, uneasy. Some of them probably believed the stories. Others just didn't want to be next. The breaking point came one evening when Lily screamed from the backyard. I ran out and found 2 men, not in uniforms, but with those same HOA badges on their polos, standing by the fence. One was holding a clipboard. The other was taking pictures. What are you doing on my property? I demanded. The taller one didn't flinch. Routine inspection, he said, without permission. He gestured at the clipboard. Section 4A of the bylaws authorizes property verification in cases of ongoing violations. You mean harassment, I said. The man smiled faintly. You can call it what you want, sir. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. If I see either of you here again, I won't call the HOA. I'll call the sheriff. They left, but not before one of them whispered something to the other. I caught just enough to hear it. Vance said he's going to break him. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside felt amplified. Every crunch of gravel, every rustle of leaves. I checked the cameras twice, made sure the doors were locked, and still couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in. The next morning, I found tire tracks near the side fence, fresh wide, like someone had backed a cart or small vehicle up to the property line. They'd been there again, watching, measuring. That weekend, a new letter came. Failure to comply with community directives may result in escalated enforcement measures. Escalated enforcement. I didn't know what that meant, but I would soon. Monday afternoon, while I was in the driveway washing the truck, a black SUV pulled up. Tinted windows, no plates. It idled for a moment, then rolled slowly past. I caught a glimpse of a camera lens behind the glass. Lily was inside doing homework, Aaron folding laundry in the living room. They didn't see it. I didn't tell them, but I knew what it meant. Surveillance, intimidation. They wanted me to know they were watching. Over the next few weeks, things spiraled. Letters turned into visits. Visits turned into summons. The HOA started showing up at my door unannounced, clipboard in hand, claiming to be investigating safety violations. They cited me for things that didn't even exist. Excessive glare from windows. Improper alignment of garden hose. Erin broke down one night after dinner, hands shaking around a mug of tea. Jack, she said, what if they never stop? What if we just sell and leave? I looked around at the house, the walls we'd painted together, the backyard where Lily learned to ride her bike, the flag folded neatly on the mantel from my last deployment. If we leave, I said quietly, they win. But the truth was, we were already losing. Sleep, peace, trust. Then, one morning, we woke up to find a bright orange notice nailed to our front door. Pending eviction review, it read, due to repeated violations and failure to comply with board directives. Eviction. From our own home, I tore it down and called the sheriff. Deputy Rowe came by that afternoon. A good man, tired eyes. He'd been by before, always sympathetic, always careful. He looked at the notice and sighed. They can't evict you, Jack, not legally. But they're trying to build a case. For what? Civil injunction. They're pushing for a court order, claiming you're a threat to the community. I laughed bitterly. A threat? To who? Their lawns? Rowe rubbed the back of his neck. You'd be surprised what a well-funded HOA can get away with. That night, I got an email from Howard. No greeting, no signature. Just one line. Step down quietly, and we'll reconsider enforcement. Step down from what? Being a resident? A father? A man who refused to bow. I didn't reply. The next day, the fines hit 5 digits. They'd backdated charges, added retroactive penalties for past infractions. According to their math, I owed the HOA $12,470. They put a lien on my property. That was when I knew it wasn't just harassment anymore. It was war, but wars don't break you all at once. They wear you down piece by piece. A missed night of sleep, a friend who stops calling, a daughter who flinches at every car door closing outside. One night, around midnight, the cameras caught movement by the gate. 3 figures, flashlights, low voices. I turned up the volume and heard them clearly this time. Vance said, "Get proof," one whispered. "He wants this airtight before the meeting." I stepped out onto the porch, flashlight in one hand, phone recording in the other. "Hey!" I shouted. "You're trespassing." They froze, then bolted. The next morning, another letter. Tampering with community patrols constitutes aggressive conduct. Further incidents may result in legal action. They were building a paper trail, turning my defense into ammunition against me. Aaron begged me to stop fighting. Lily started sleeping with her light on again. Every part of me wanted to protect them, but I couldn't protect them by surrendering. So I went public. I uploaded footage of the patrols, the notices, the enforcement visits. Within hours, the video spread across local forums. Comments poured in, some supportive, others calling me a troublemaker. But people were watching now, and the HOA hated that. That same night, a black SUV parked across the street again. Engine running. Headlights off. It stayed there until sunrise. That morning, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was calm, measured. Too calm, Mr. Mercer, it said. This is your final warning. Comply, or consequences will escalate. Then the line went dead. The next day, Lily found a dead bird on the porch. Its neck twisted, wings splayed. Aaron screamed. I buried it in the garden myself, fists shaking. Something in me hardened that day. The part of me that had once believed this was just a petty neighborhood feud realized the truth. This was organized, controlled, intentional. I wasn't just fighting a board. I was fighting people who thought power made them untouchable, and if they wanted a fight, they'd get one, because they'd made one mistake. They'd forgotten who I was before I moved to Brook Haven. I wasn't a man who bowed to threats. I was a Marine, and I'd spent my life facing worse than cowards, hiding behind bylaws. So when the next mandatory meeting notice came, stamped, official smug, I didn't throw it away. I circled the date, and I made a promise. The next time we met, it wouldn't be on their terms. It would be the day they realized that the man they'd been trying to intimidate wasn't afraid anymore. They'd turned my peace into a battlefield. Now it was my turn to fight. Back. Morning light broke soft and uncertain. Over Brook Haven Estates, painting long shadows across the driveways that had once felt like borders in a Cold War. For the first time in months, the street was quiet, not the kind of tense, heavy quiet that hides trouble, but the kind that comes after a storm finally spends itself. The HOA office stood dark, blinds drawn, its proud little sign leaning crooked where someone had pulled it out of the ground. The whispers had started before dawn. They arrested Vance. By noon, the whole neighborhood knew. Jack Mercer didn't celebrate. He stood at his window, mug in hand, watching as two deputies carried boxes from the old clubhouse, file folders, ledgers, envelopes marked confidential. The same deputies who'd once looked the other way now moved with quiet purpose. Behind them, news vans idled, cameras turning toward the houses like curious eyes. Erin came up beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "It's over," she said softly. But Jack didn't answer right away. Over wasn't a word he trusted anymore. He'd seen too many endings that were just pauses in disguise. When the deputies left, a small group of neighbors gathered by the curb, people who'd once crossed the street to avoid him. Mrs. Turner, the widow with the azalea finds, carried a tray of muffins wrapped in a clean dish towel. Her voice trembled as she said, "We should have stood up sooner." Jack gave a small nod. "You did now. That's what matters." In the days that followed, Brook Haven changed in slow, uneven ways. The HOA board dissolved under court order, a temporary committee formed, 5 residents chosen by public vote, no closed doors, no private rules. They met in the open, under the gazebo near the pond where everyone could listen. The bylaws were rewritten, this time with real transparency. No hidden clauses, no inflated fines, no phony enforcement patrols. The golf carts disappeared. The fake badges went with them. Some neighbors left, people too proud to face what they'd supported. Others stayed, quietly rebuilding trust. Kids played on the sidewalks again. Lily's laughter drifted through the air like a sound the neighborhood had forgotten it could make. She planted sunflowers along the fence, bright defiance growing where fear once lived. One afternoon, a county truck arrived. Workers removed the last of the private enforcement signs. Jack watched from the porch as they unbolted each one, the metal clanking like chains falling away. He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders eased. That night, Deputy Rowe stopped by. No uniform, just jeans, and a windbreaker. They sat on the porch steps, the crickets filling the silence between them. "Audit's complete," Rowe said. They found over $100,000 rerouted through shell companies tied to Vance. Wire fraud, embezzlement, false impersonation charges, the works. He won't be seeing daylight any time soon. Jack nodded slowly. "What about the others?" "Some turned on him," Rowe said. "Testified to save themselves. The rest are under investigation. County's already talking about new oversight laws. This case might set precedent for the whole state. Jack stared out toward the darkened clubhouse, the wind stirring the flag on his porch. Maybe something good finally comes out of this. Roe gave a small, wry smile. You did that, you know. Most people just pay the fine and keep their head down. You didn't. Jack didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the horizon where the streetlights faded into the distance. I just didn't like bullies, he said. Never have. The deputy clapped him on the shoulder before leaving. The taillights disappeared down the road, and for a long time Jack sat alone under the soft hum of the porch light, thinking about how easily power had turned into rot and how close he'd come to losing everything. The following week brought a letter, this time with the county seal embossed clean and real. Notice of dismissal. All pending actions resolved in favor of Jack and Aaron Mercer. Underneath, a simple handwritten note, "Thank you for standing up." Aaron framed it. Lily insisted it go on the wall by the front door. "So nobody forgets," she said. Word of the case spread beyond Brook Haven. Other neighborhoods reached out, people who'd faced their own petty tyrants and thought they had no recourse. Jack received emails, handwritten notes, even phone calls from veterans, parents, retirees. They all said the same thing. You gave us courage. Reporters came too. Some wanted interviews, others just wanted the footage, the viral video that had started it all, Jack standing between his daughter and those fake enforcers. He never watched it again, but he knew what it showed. Not rage, not defiance, just a father protecting what mattered. Still, not everything went back to normal. Late at night sometimes a car would idle at the end of the street, maybe just a neighbor coming home late. Maybe not. Jack learned to live with it, the awareness that some shadows never fade completely. Then one morning, months later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a black USB drive and a single piece of paper. 3 words. There's more above. Jack stared at it for a long time before setting it in the desk drawer beside the photo, the one that had shown him and Lily walking into court. Aaron found him there later, quiet, thoughtful. "Are you going to open it?" she asked. He shook his head. Not yet, because he'd learned something in all this, that justice wasn't a single moment or a single man's downfall. It was a living thing, something you had to keep alive every day by refusing to look away. He'd fought in foreign wars, but this one, this neighborhood battle, had taught him what freedom looked like when it was personal. The weeks stretched into months. The neighborhood grew greener, livelier. New families moved in, drawn by stories of reform and community strength. The HOA sign, once a symbol of control, was replaced by a simple wooden plaque, Brook Haven Estates, a community, not a command. At the next community meeting, Jack stood under the gazebo, sunlight filtering through the leaves. Lily sat near the front, Aaron beside her, smiling. The crowd was larger than ever, and quieter too, listening, not waiting to judge. Jack spoke plainly. Rules keep order, but people keep community. If you ever forget that, you end up like we did, policing each other instead of protecting each other. Let's not make that mistake again. Applause rippled through the crowd, genuine and lasting. For the first time, Jack believed it might stick. That night, as the sky deepened to a quiet blue, Lily came out to the porch with her school project, a model of their neighborhood made from cardboard and paint. Tiny houses, tiny trees, and in the middle, their home. "You think it's really over?" she asked. Jack looked at her for a long moment. "I think we're finally on the right side of it," he said. She smiled, satisfied, and went back inside. But Jack stayed out a little longer, listening to the sounds of sprinklers and crickets, watching porch lights blink on one by one across the street. The world didn't feel small anymore. It felt earned. Still, sometimes when the wind shifted, he thought about that flash drive in his desk, about what more above might mean. corruption doesn't die easy, it just changes hands. But for now, peace was enough. He'd fought his war and kept his family safe. He'd proven that truth can still outlast intimidation. When he finally turned off the porch light that night, he paused at the door and looked back once more at the quiet street, the lawns trimmed, the mailboxes standing straight, the houses looking almost innocent again. Then he said softly, almost to himself, "Funny thing about power. It doesn't disappear when you break it. It waits to see who picks it up next." He closed the door, and somewhere out there, beyond Brook Haven, another HOA president poured his coffee, looked at the news, and frowned. Because stories like this don't just end, they echo. And maybe that's the real lesson. In neighborhoods and in life, peace isn't something you inherit. It's something you defend every single day. So, if it were you, if they came for your family, your home, your sense of safety, would you fight back, or would you look away and call it just another rule?